Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles. We've all seen this map before, standard battle on mines. It's the smallest high tier map in the game, but it's been a really long time since I've seen this tank, the T26E4 Super Pershing. Played for us today by Kellum95. Real tank, by the way. I mean, yeah, obviously the Pershing's a real tank, but I mean this variant of the Pershing. The Super Pershing, the T26E4. This is not something that Wargaming just made up. Even though it looks like something that Wargaming just made up, this was an actual field modification of the Pershing, done in the European Theatre of Operations right at the end of World War II. And it was technically a success, although actually not. Yeah, that sounds confusing. I'm going to have to explain, and I will in a moment. First, however, Kellum, playing Billy No Mates over here, all on his own, on this Western Island. If there's any enemy opposition, like that Progetto, he could be in a lot of trouble. Have you ever heard the expression, professionals are predictable, it's the amateurs you have to watch out for? This is a prime example. Kellum's Super Pershing has that Progetto massively out-armoured and outgunned. A professional in a Progetto, in this situation, and when I say professional, I mean somebody who's actually capable of thinking and breathing at the same time, would not be standing their ground against a T26E4 Super Pershing unless they knew backup was mere seconds away. Which I suspect is probably one of the reasons why Kellum is hugging this rock like his life depends on it, because he's expecting, based on how the Progetto acted, more tanks to be coming around the corner, and yet the only thing in sight is this T-34-100. Kellum has made the mistake of assuming that the Progetto actually knew what he was doing. He did not. Although if you're going to make a mistake, it's the safe kind of mistake to make, because Kellum is just as alone over here as the Progetto obviously was. I mean, it's obvious now. But if he had just assumed upon meeting the Progetto that the Progetto was in fact alone, and he charged forward, that could have been an extremely expensive mistake if he'd been wrong. So it's always best to just err on the side of caution. Assume people know what they're doing until they prove that they don't. But anyway, yeah, Super Pershing, real field modification of the T26 Pershing. And it does look like a bit of a Franken tank with these weird ass tubes on the top of the turret and all that bolted on armour on the front, but that's because it was a field modification. They experimented by basically welding a whole bunch of boilerplate armour onto the front and extending the 90mm gun barrel to give it more velocity. That's what those weird tubes are for on top of the turret. Those are actually recoil buffers. Because if you extend the length of the barrel, it's burning propellant in the barrel for longer, so it gives it more recoil, so they needed to add more recoil compensation. What Kellum's doing here may seem counterintuitive. I mean, he is literally sitting right in the middle of a whole bunch of open ground. There is zero concealment, and at first glance, zero cover. But he is actually hull down. Despite the fact that the enemy tanks over there are on substantially higher ground than him, he is actually able to go hull down against them by virtue of being, well, in the water on the other side of this sandbank. This is actually a very, very good spot. Particularly for this tank, because of all of that extra applique armour bolted onto the front of the turret and the hull. And it does have an extremely accurate gun. It's not without weak spots though. The buffer tubes on top of the turret are part of the hitbox and are effectively unarmoured. So if you try to take on a Super Pershing from the front, even if it is hull down, it's actually very easy. You just aim for those recoil tubes. But that's a lot easier said than done at this kind of range. It's not that the enemy tanks shooting at him can't actually hit those recoil buffers, it's just that if they do, it'll be more through luck than judgment. Oh, if he just waited another half a second, that would have been a kill on the T-34. But anyway, yeah, so these field modifications, all of that armour, longer barrel, recoil buffer tubes on the top of the turret to compensate for the increased recoil from the extra velocity imparted by that longer barrel. And the gun was excellent. It really was very, very good. They did some field tests. They had a knocked out Jagdpanzer IV. And they took it around the back of the factory, or the workshop, where they'd been modifying the Super Pershing, and they parked it up against a hill. and they took a couple of shots at it with this 90mm gun. The shots went right through the front of the Jagdpanzer. They went right through the fighting compartment, they went right through the engine, they went right through the rear armour, and then it buried itself in the hill behind the Jagdpanzer so deep they never found the shot. Oh, the gun worked. I mean, it got the job done. Unfortunately, mobility-wise, thanks to all of that extra armour and that huge gun barrel and those buffer tubes, the Pershing's engine really wasn't up to the task. Possibly worse, though, was the fact that all of that weight, the armour and the turret, the whole front, the extra long gun barrel, the buffer tubes, it was all at the front of the tank. And while it was certainly possible that the tank could maybe travel 30 kilometres in an hour or two, it would have probably worn out the front suspension before it got there. So, technically, a success. They tested in the field. The field tests were successful. The armour was good. The gun was amazing. Actually, bit of a failure. Just an impractical design. And one that they didn't really need, because the 90mm gun was kind of plenty good enough anyway. And all the King Tigers that they thought this thing was going to have to fight, well, they just never really materialised. A bit like any credible opposition from the enemy team in this battle. No Top Gun, unfortunately. He wasn't able to. I mean, this thing was just never going to be fast enough to get the final kill on the enemy artillery, but still, that was an ace tanker in the T-26E4 Super Pershing. The fact that he got the ace tanker, though, was mostly due to a combination of luck and positioning. Positioning, in that he was on the western island on the mine's map, and luck, the Progetto did not have any backup. Because the Super Pershing, while it can do very well, he did very well here, it's an awkward tank to do well in. Because of two factors, the bad mobility and the armour weak spots. Those recoil buffer tubes on top of the turret. That armour weak spot means that if you're brawling at close range, where you normally would be in a tank with armour like this, your armour's meaningless, because all they have to do is aim for those recoil buffers. Which means in order to do well in the Super Pershing, you either have to be facing enemies who have no idea where to shoot you, which, let's face it, the Progetto didn't, or you have to be keeping the enemy team at arm's length, medium range at least, and keep the tank moving or in cover between shots so they can't actually hit those recoil tubes. The problem with that is that if the battle starts getting away from you, the mobility on the Super Pershing is so bad that, well, you really just can't keep up. So like I said, it's an awkward tank to do well in, but, well, Kellum kind of had the perfect storm of circumstances in this particular battle here on the mines map. Combination of enemies who had no idea where to shoot him, and the opportunity to keep the enemy at the kind of ranges where even if they did know where to shoot him, there was no way the guns were going to be accurate enough to reliably do so. And of course, because it's a Tier 8 premium, even if you do go crazy with the gold ammo, which Kellum didn't do in this battle at all, because that 90mm gun is more than good enough without it, it's basically impossible for you to lose money regardless of how bad a game you actually end up having. Of course, as we all saw, due to circumstances, a little bit of luck and some smart positioning, Kellum had the exact opposite of a bad game, getting himself the ace tanker in the T-26E4 Super Pershing. Hope you all enjoyed it. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.